When I had my first conversation with Pete, we talked a lot about how does actually the future organization look in the hospitality business, and here we talk really about how does actually the senior team look in a business, and how many headcounts do you actually need, and do you actually need to have everybody on full time? It's actually end of an era of having these huge head offices and headcount costs, and actually this is actually an opportunity to actually quietly rewriting how we actually organize, structure, and lead our hospitality business. And that's what we decided that was a really interesting subject to visit, because lots of people have heard about fractional has become a thing in hospitality, especially I've seen in marketing and finance, but I think there's much more to it. And Pete found the same after, selling his business and moving on from hospitality, and actually went into consultancy himself. And so he has a lot of direct experience on both sides with working with fractional talent, if we call that. Welcome to the show, Pete. I'm very excited about this conversation, because I believe it's one of those where we actually can maybe find a way to bring both innovation and profitability back into hospitality.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be on your podcast.
Yeah, and then Pete was one of those guys. He was very eager contacting me on LinkedIn, because I think he said he's listened to the show, and I thought, that's really interesting. And then I went and looked what he did, and I thought I need to know more about that. I think it's really interesting approach. So I think the story, Pete, is quite important. Yeah, talk a bit about your story from being an operator to a consultant, and now I will call it community/platform founder. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, So I've been in the hospitality industry my entire career since leaving university. Came up with essentially a hospitality tech startup in 2004 with a couple of my colleagues from my university course. We tried to do a very early version of sort of HelloFresh, Mindful Chef, like the meal kit delivered concept. Didn't quite take off the way we had hoped. A little bit early, I think, and a little bit ahead of the curve on that one. But that business sort of morphed into a hospitality operator business. We worked with cultural venues predominantly, and that was my sort of introduction into the industry. So we built that business up over a long time. We ran it for nearly 20 years. Learned so much along the way. Made loads of mistakes. Had a few sort of lucky breaks, had a few unlucky breaks, etc. As you normally find. But I got a real grounding in the industry from the operator side. We started off in the sort of, I guess, like retail side of things. Then we moved into like the outside catering, venue catering side of things. We then moved into fixed venue, restaurant, cafe operations. So we had a lot of experience over those years, which I think looking back had given me sort of good grounding for what I went on to next. But yeah, like I said, we ran that business for nearly 20 years. We sold it about 3 years ago, I think. And after that, I was not really sure what I wanted to do next. I took a little bit of time out, got involved in a couple of things outside of the hospitality industry. I think there was, I then realized how much I still loved the hospitality industry. How, I think working on projects within hospitality excites me more than any other industry. And I fell into some consultancy. I had a conversation with someone shortly after leaving the previous business that transitioned into a 6-month consultancy project. And then for probably the first couple of years, I just did various pieces of consultancy and sort of set myself up as a freelance consultant, specializing in sort of unique and cultural venue side of things. And that gave me a real insight into the freelancer side of things. We've done, through my old business, we've done some consultancy projects with other venues in our sector. It was never something that we marketed. It was just things that naturally came about, or people got in touch with us. So I knew how the process worked, but I'd never sort of gone out to market and tried to tried to sell with myself being the product, if that makes sense, which is quite a new thing, can be quite a uncomfortable thing the first time you do it. And I think what I realized over that year or so was that firstly, there were an enormous number of people recently all moving into a freelance model within hospitality. So consultants, fractionals, like for the fractional thing as a buzzword, I think has definitely exploded over the last couple of years. And that, so there were way more people doing the sort of thing that I was doing than I'd expected. Yeah. And secondly, I couldn't really work out where essentially the town square or the marketplace for people like me was. Where do I advertise my services in a place where there is a concentration of buyers of the services? So hospitality operators, venue owners, cultural organizations, etc. And it just felt like that was missing from the market. So I had to go building it. I basically had an idea of a marketplace for hospitality consultancy services. I did a bit of research and I realized that there were obviously a lot of marketplaces for fractional freelance work, but they're quite generic, or they're global, or they're something that would be, if you were looking for maybe someone to design your logo, that might, or I don't know, a dog walking service or something, it wouldn't be the same place that you go to find somebody to reposition your restaurant group. So it felt like, for me, that the hospitality was a big enough industry that it deserved its own dedicated platform and forum for that sort of work. Had a good look around. I couldn't really see anything that fitted the bill that did that. So I thought there might be a gap. So I built it. So I vibe coded the platform myself. I launched it in under a week. I gave myself a week from having the idea to launch it, because I'm an endless like tinkerer, and I just never. I would still be like adjusting the size of the logo on the homepage, or like the color palette or whatever now. So I basically said, right, it's going live in 7 days, even if it's terrible, even if it doesn't work. And so yes, I did that. So I launched Well Seasoned, to the name of the platform, in February, and yeah, it's basically taken off since there. We had 20 people signed up on the first day, 100 within the first month, and then we're now 5 and a bit months in. We've got about 550 consultants on the platform, regular projects being posted by hospitality businesses, and quite a nice sort of flourishing community within it.
And how many hospitality business has signed up? Because that's quite interesting, because there's, as you say, there's a lot of these fractional people out there, or ex-senior people for hospitality that is now selling consultancy services and so on. So I guess there's also, as you said, there's company actually putting projects up, means there actually is a need for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely been the hardest side of the marketplace to grow. We probably had 25 or so hospitality businesses engage with it at various different points since it's been launched. And one of the things I realized actually is that posting projects is not always, in many cases, is not the preferred approach. So there's essentially two options for hospitality businesses. They can post a project to the community and everybody sees it, and relevant people, apply or start a conversation. Or they can sort of search and filter through the directory and reach out to people one-on-one. Actually, I think that the reach out method is probably more popular with more hospitality businesses, especially those who've got a commercially sensitive project or problem to solve.
And what is it that you think, like, you can see there's definitely been early traction very quickly from both sides, especially the consultant. I can see that thing where you say, what watering hole do I go to to actually sell my services? I can totally see that as a past consultant in the industry as well, before the pandemic, where you were in principle very depending on the power of your network and the quality of that, and actually being very clear about what your unique proposition is, but you always have to be. What problems do you solve and what pain do you solve? And in principle, and it was very hard, because at the same time you were doing the job, the consultancy job or the fractional job, if we call it that, you also, you had to go and do business development, which is in principle what you offer here, like a platform where you are always live in some kind of way and people can find you. But why do you think it's so relevant now with fractional compared to, just say, before the pandemic or a couple of years ago? Because as you came out and became a consultant, you were absolutely right. It exploded with people,
Yeah.
especially on LinkedIn, that were
Yeah.
selling fractional services to hospitality.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just to pick up on your previous point there, the point about you being in business development mode or working mode, I think is a really interesting one from a freelance point of view. Because one of the things I realized quite quickly was that when I am 100% of my business, I can either be in outreach, business development, sort of sales mode, or I can be in doing the work, working on a project for a client mode. And it's quite hard to do both at the same time. And often I think what you find, and I've probably spoken to 200 consultants in the last 5 months, and the same thing keeps coming back, is that you generally, it's feast or famine. So you're doing those, you're starting off, you don't have the work. So you're doing loads of outreach, turning up to every event, speaking to lots of people, basically pedaling very hard to get traction. And then sooner or later, you hopefully get that traction. So you get interest, you get engaged, hopefully get engaged in a project or more than one project. And then all of a sudden you shift into doing the workload, which is great because you're getting paid. It's the thing that you're trying to do. But the business development side of things drops off. So what can happen is that the pipeline of stuff coming, of new projects to work on when your current project ends dries up because you've had your head down, focused on delivering for a client, and you weren't there doing the outreach to build your project 6-9 months time. And I saw that as a problem. And again, I was looking at what the solutions would be. And I sort of felt like having a sort of evergreen presence on a platform that you can set up once. Okay, you go and you update it when you do a new project, you got a new case study, or you built a new package or whatever. But by and large, it stays the same, and it doesn't. Unlike a social media, like a LinkedIn page, where if you don't post anything for 6 months, you suddenly, the algorithm fades you into insignificance. A directory listing is different because nobody knows whether that you posted that, whether you created your profile yesterday or a year ago. And so so I like the idea of giving consultants a presence on the platform that just lives there, and if they're doing, 50 hours a week, head down with a client for 3 months, don't come up for air, they will still hopefully be in the mix for relevant projects and relevant work coming their way. So I think that's a really good point. And then on the fractional thing, I think it's a mixture of different things. I think that the post-COVID people like the idea of, especially at a senior level, flexibility around the way that they work, where they work, when they work, how they work. I think we all got a taste of that in COVID, and then some of us went back to more structured roles where you're physically needed in a place at a certain time. And I think there was a sort of section of senior hospitality people who just felt, actually, well, I'd rather have that flexibility. I'd rather work with a number of different clients on my own timetable than be tied to someone else's. I think there's enormous job insecurity in hospitality at the moment. I think that especially at senior level, there's lots of redundancies, there's lots of restructuring. So I think some people found their way into the freelance work through a process like that, rather than necessarily thinking that it was the way they wanted to go. I would say that if you're working for any hospitality business at a senior level at the moment, and you've got a high salary level, I would say that the chances of that job still existing in a year's time are probably not great. A lot of people, I'm not saying it was me massively doom and gloom, but I'm saying that there's so much turmoil at the moment and so much need for operators to cut costs at senior levels. I think actually being freelance with maybe 2 or 3 clients on a, day or so a week's contract is probably more secure than having one full-time job with one operator. That I personal opinion might be wrong. I'm not basing that on any sort of data or anything, but it's just the way that I feel that for my sense of the industry at the moment. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the professional, but then also from the business's point of view, having a salary and full-time employment contract is a big commitment that only becomes more expensive. Obviously I'm not saying you can run your business entirely on fractional. That hopefully will never be the case. But at a certain level, and especially for project-based work that is highly skilled, I think actually it makes more sense to bring in an expert on a specified period of time with a very detailed brief, full accountability, so they know that they're expected to deliver that work within that, to that spec within that time period. And it's a resource that you can dial up and dial down, which I think is key for really all hospitality operators at the moment, because nobody's lives are getting easier, and I don't think they're going to anytime soon. And everybody's looking to be to manage costs as well as they can. And I think a big part of being able to manage costs is having flexibility around the big numbers. If you can dial a resource up and down as and when you need it, that's much more. You give yourself a lot more options than if you have that resource as a fixed cost every single month that goes out. So I think that both sides have sort of come together and sort of realized that it makes sense both ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's very interesting. After our first conversation, Pete, I had a conversation with a founder of a business, and that founder was quite savvy in business development, sales, marketing, but started a hospitality business. And I came to the same conclusion as you just said. It's just, I can't have all these senior heads where my money has to be spent is where the value for the customer is. So it's like in the front line, either on training the front line to be better, the product to be better, the standards in the restaurants to be better. And scrap, they had a couple of marketing and sales people working. I think there were 4 in that team. And over the last 2 years, either they left, they haven't replaced them, but then used people on very specific things. Like we needed to do something around performance marketing, got somebody in on that. We needed to build a new website. We had somebody in for a period doing that. We found the best one we could have. But instead of having them on a contract, we gave them 6 months to do the project. They might took 7. But in a way, you have much more focus on getting a fewer things done in a high quality, instead of you have to find out, to fill out this full-time marketing, head of marketing day, we need to have a social posting calendar full. So you actually force yourself to create work as well, he said. It was really interesting because I hadn't thought about that. There's actually positions where you come up with processes and procedures that might not deliver value to the frontline experience for customers in the end. It doesn't make things better. It's just a nice to have. So he's very much in that, the 20% that gives 80, and how he brings in people on that. And especially that was his focus, because I'm very good at this. So I don't need anyone to develop a strategy for me. I need people that can execute on the specific competence. Yeah. With specific competence to do the job. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that you generally find, that at a senior level, you're hiring somebody who's a head of a department, director of ops, marketing, or whatever. They're going to have quite a broad, general overview, knowledge and experience of that role, because you want them to be this sort of, overseer of everything. But maybe that means that they are not the best person for a very focused, very specific project-based, thing. Maybe you've got a marketing director, but you've got a project that requires deep, SEO knowledge, or, getting surfaced within AI tools or something like that. Is it likely that your marketing director is going to be an expert in that? Is going to be the absolute best person to deliver that project? Maybe, but quite probably not. And actually plugging in niche experts as and when needed, I think is a really smart approach. And you can, they don't have they're not tied down by internal politics, by the, once you get into a role in a company, you get, there's a calendar of meetings that you're turning up to. There's all sorts of like internal bits and pieces that can take your focus off that specific project. You can get, you start to develop, sort of like friendships and personal relationships with the, your colleagues, which can cloud your, cloud your judgment in certain cases. So I think actually having an external person who isn't trying to be, isn't trying to win friends, isn't trying to, doesn't get involved or cares about any of the internal politics and is just focused on delivering one specific thing, can be a really powerful thing. And and if you've got, there are so many niche experts within hospitality now. I mean, it's incredible. Every week I'm meeting new people. I'm like, God, wow. You're like the focus is becoming narrower and narrower because people are developing really, really well-crafted skills, and they just want to go deeper into that one specific thing, and they don't necessarily want to just be a sort of generalist in their field, with loads of reports and sort of operating in that sort of big company upper level structure. They just want to sort of stay in their zone and be laser focused on really nailing like one or two specific things.
If the word Airbnb has ever crossed your mind, whether you've thought about listing your home while you're away, or you got a property sitting there, or you're already hosting and starting to feel the weight of it, this one's for you. Here's what nobody really tells you before you start. Hosting sounds simple. You list your space, guest book, you collect your income, but somewhere between managing 3 different platforms, responding to messages at odd hours, adjusting your prices, and chasing calendar updates, it stops feeling like an income and starts feeling like a second job. Logify is what lots of hosts wish they found sooner. Everything lives in one place. Your booking sync across Airbnb, Booking.com, Verbro, and the rest. Your guest communication and your own direct booking website, so guests can come to you directly. They're also launching an AI assistant this summer that handles your guest messaging automatically, so the whole operation can actually run in the background. For Maverick listeners, there's a special offer. 20% off all yearly and bi-yearly plans. Use the code Maverick20 when you check out.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting as well, because I think in hospitality before you had quite, and I've been a consultant myself, you had to be broad to get the gig, but actually because of this, shift that's happening, you can now say, I am the world best at, or I can be the world best at doing inventory. Yeah. I can be the world best in performance marketing, and then you work on that. And actually that's what drives you, what you get energy from, and therefore your results with the client will get better. And it's, I found out during it took actually a long time because you had to do a lot of different stuff. I found out on like specific areas where I got to them, I just had to say no, because no, I'm not very good at that. But if it's like people strategy and culture, huge value, implementing tech, huge value, I can do because it's change management in principle, and franchising, because my background is McDonald's and I know how to build manuals and how to franchise an organization. And that was like the only thing I said yes to, but actually it was hard to get enough traction because I was fighting against internal people that was doing that job. Yeah. Because at that time that was not this situation. Yeah. And you were like trying to offer something that they all felt they already have a person in the organization should be doing, but they couldn't because they hadn't done it enough times to really have the expertise in that. So it's really interesting with that niche focus. And I think that's really the key thing here now. You can actually find people that has done this maybe 10 or 20 times before they do it for you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've found the platform being used for increasingly, which I didn't really consider when I was building it, is consultants, like you were describing before, a consultant who's on a job, who's got the brief, creeps beyond their expertise. And like you say, there's maybe a temptation in the past to say, well, I don't want to disappoint the client. So I can probably make a decent job of that thing. So I'll say I'll do it. And fingers crossed, it all goes okay. What you can do now is you can find an expert for that bit. You can, connect with them through Well Seasoned or WhatsApp, our WhatsApp channel, and go back to your client and say, look, this is 80% of this brief is me. It's exactly what I do. 20% is not my core skill, but I brought this person in. We'll work on it together. They'll do 20%, I'll do 80%. So you can sort of plug in different people and sort of, self-contract or work together, how you want to structure it. And I think that's going to be you already see it now, there, a few consultants who typically work, they've got complementary services, and maybe one leads onto the other, and they typically, they go around and work on the same projects together, and they, every time they work together, they're becoming, sort of more aligned, and they get to know each other better. So I think that's going to be a potential model as well.
Like you said before, Pete, that like right now the pressure is high. Yeah, it's margins are tight, and if you have a very high paid job, you should probably be nervous. That was where we talked about also. But again, what is like the real value? Because now you've had 25 project you said that's been through. What have you seen? Do you have an idea about what kind of value these projects have done for the operator? As they, maybe some of them is on the go right now. We don't know the end result, but typical, what kind of return of investment would they see? Besides it's more flexibility, lower costs, direct costs. It's not a labor cost; it's a business cost. I guess when you have somebody in, you can perceive it as labor cost, but it's more like a business development cost. So, what are typical the results people see? And you can start in a specific project where there was like value delivered to the business.
Yeah. So in terms of, it's probably a bit too early for end of project, what value has been delivered, because to my knowledge, I'm not sure if any of the projects have actually finished yet. A few of them in quite multi-year projects. But I'd say anecdotally, the things I've found is that it's very fast. So generally, when a business shares a project or an opportunity on the platform, they typically get quite a lot of responses in the first couple of days. It tends to be quite focused as well. So like relevant professionals for the project, not just 300 people all applying on the hope that, the idea when you put a job ad out a few years ago in hospitality for like a head chef, and you'd get people from electricians from Australia applying or whatever, just because they've ticked every single job, send my CV out. So that hasn't happened. And what I've typically found is that businesses are sitting down and talking to really relevant consultants really fast on the via the platform, and I think one puts somebody in within a few days of the project going live. So yeah, but I'll definitely, as soon as I start getting data coming through from completed projects, I'll be sharing that, because I'm probably as intrigued as anyone to understand what the value's been. But yeah, that's probably where we're up to so far.
But it's very interesting, and what I picked up was the speed of getting a person in to do the job. Yeah. If you had to hire somebody in, you would have to go through quite a process. Yeah. You would probably check your network first. Some people will also have recruitment on, which also have a cost. Then you would have to do all the interviewing. You also maybe put a job ad live. And you have all this time cycling around for a couple of months to find the right candidate. If you want to hire the right candidate, often you need to meet a lot to confirm you had already talked with the right candidate, or you have the wrong candidate. And then you also have the whole risk about, is this actually going to work? Yeah, because now you're launching into the company, and it's quite interesting. I've seen a couple of people in my network actually started as fractional, now they're actually back in as full-time employees. So it's also could have the other way around, I think, where there's huge value for business to find out, do we actually need this expertise in the business? So it's actually that, let's test it out. Yeah. A specific skill. Do we actually need a CFO? Let's get one in and see if actually there is enough in this for them. Yeah. Because we have a really good bookkeeper, accountant. So we think we can do it, but you might find out that a CFO's job is actually not doing the accounts. That's just a small bit of it. It's actually finding value adding activities within the business. Yeah. So build the cash flow of the future and straighten the business's business assets and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. I think really good points. I think that the first thing pick on the first point about hiring for a full-time role versus a fractional. Like you say, you've got the on-ramp and the off-ramp are both much longer with an employed role. So you've got, the whole, scoping out the network, putting together a brief, putting an ad out, letting that run for a bit, interview process, whittling it down. And then you might find the perfect person and they've got 3-month notice period at their current place because they're so brilliant that their current employer doesn't want to let them go. So it can be probably, very minimum 6 months, maybe, potentially longer than that. And equally, if it doesn't work out, you've got, there's a lot of process to go through. It's emotionally stressful for you and for the employee. So you should really, if it, hopefully it works, and hopefully they find they become a long-term employee. But if they don't, the costs are really significant to the business. Whereas, a fractional, you can bring them in generally very, very quickly. There are a lot of people in the market now, and there's a lot of people willing, ready to start straight away. And if it doesn't work, the off ramp is easy. There isn't the drama or the I guess like the impact on the business that you have with a senior full-time employee that doesn't work out. And you can shake hands and go your separate ways. And they've maybe got a valuable case study from working with your business, even if for a short period of time, that they can go on to the next place and you can carry on. And then your point about fractionals blending into full-time is really interesting as well, because I see that quite a bit, whereby, especially for a scaling business that has, when they start, they probably need, somebody to just do the invoices and post stuff on Zero. And then from your CFO analogy, and then as they grow, those requirements become more and more, but it doesn't quite go from like, oh, it's a 30K a year job here, and now all of a sudden, and it's an 80K a year job next month. It's going to go gradually between, and the period between those 2 points is stressful, because you've got requirements that are more than the budget that you've got for the current person, but you don't quite yet have the budget for the full-time, bigger, more senior person. So you do literally need a slice of that person, the fractional model. And maybe it starts off at 2 days a month, and then within 2 or 3 years, they're working 3 days a week. And you say, look, God, we've worked together 3 years. You know this thing inside out. Do you want to be our CFO? And you see that happen all the time. Fractional gets embedded in an organization, delivers loads of value. The organization grows. They're taking on more and more work. And then there's a point at which they go, look, it just makes sense for me to work for you. And if it works for the fractional, great, works for the business. And if you think about it, you've essentially done like a 2-3 year interview for that person. So the risk of saying to that person, do you want to have a full-time job, is much lower than what you get just going out to the open market through an interview process. And a lot of fractionals and freelancers are open to going back into full-time employment. They're not necessarily in the freelance world completely wedded to contract work for the rest of their careers. It might be something that they're doing for a while. It might be their life just suits their lifestyle at this point in time. And a lot of them are, will be open to those to going back into the right full-time role. But it gives both the employer and the worker the opportunity to just properly test it out. And they're then going into, if they accept that full-time CFO role or whatever, they're going into an organization where they know the culture. There isn't any sort of day one, oh God, this isn't what I thought it was going to be like, because and they've probably built it all, so they're hitting the ground running from day one, because they've been doing the job anyway through a different arrangement. So I see that happening more and more in the future of hospitality.
So if this becomes the norm, Pete, instead of the exception, across large to small hospitality businesses, is this actually destroying a bit like that kind of, the culture? We talk about the culture element and the importance of senior leaders to be around to, build and protect and develop the culture. Does that go away, you think? Because then I guess it's harder, isn't it, when you don't have, let's say you didn't have a head of people, CFO, head of marketing, director. I think these are the first jobs, that really comes into mind where I can think of IT for that sake as well. That's where you would do this kind of thing.
I don't think so. I don't think it's right for every role in the hospitality organization, and I think that you still need a core of full-time employees, full-time or part-time permanent employees, because you need that. You need that culture, you need that heartbeat of the organization. And I think, I don't see, fractional head chefs, fractional general managers, etc. I don't think, might be wrong, but I don't think that's likely. But I think it depends what the type of role it is, especially if it's a project-based or niche role. I think the fractional is perfect to plug in. And I think they probably sit above that operational layer, so somewhere between the sort of maybe C-suite or upper management and the operational teams. And then in terms of the knowledge drain, I mean, I know from running a business for 20 years with we never had any consultants or fractionals. The knowledge that somebody builds up, and if and when they leave, it's very hard to replace, because in theory, it all gets documented and processed and stays within the organization. In reality, when you're a small business and you're scrappy and everything's sort of you're in that sort of early growth stage. It happens all the time where people walk out the door with loads of domain knowledge, whereas I think that problem is actually better resolved with a fractional, because often a consultant will, when they're building a strategy or they're doing things within your business, they'll be documenting as they go. They'll be giving you regular reports. So they know that they're not going to be there full time anyway. They know that they're leaving, so that they're putting things in place, which means that the business, is run without them. Those things continue when they're not there. So I think that knowledge, the thing about the knowledge walking out the door, I think is actually less of an issue when you look at the fractional side of things. And I think in terms of the roles that you can do, I think it will evolve over the years. And I think we're probably going to go through a period of trial and error in hospitality where we go, okay, let's make this role fractional, and it doesn't work out. We go, okay, well, that doesn't work for a load of different reasons. That needs to stay in-house. But then other roles that you maybe think, oh, that can never be anything other than a full-time employee, turns out actually works really well from a fractional viewpoint. AI coming through. I'm amazed that we've got through nearly 40 minutes without saying those two letters. But that, or maybe I spoke about it at the start. I can't remember. But I think that is changing the workflows of a lot of people anyway. Yeah. So you getting, you maybe had a role where a few years ago it was a 40, 50 hour a week full-time job, and AI has come along and said, okay, all those emails and reports and presentation, time spent compiling presentation decks and things, I can do all of that for you. So you can actually spend, you can get away with it being a 2 or 3 day a week job, and then that person can then do that job at two, maybe 3 different organizations on a fractional basis rather than a full-time basis. So I think that will be, I think we'll start to see that happening a lot more, which again is, I think it's a clever use of technology, and it means, is the person that's doing, for example, the CFO role, to use your analogy earlier, if you've got one person who's done it for 20 years inside one organization, and another person who's done it across 2 or 3 different maybe 20 organizations over 20 years, working with 2 or 3 at a time, the second person is going to have a much broader set of experiences to draw from. And, I would want, if I had my senior management team, if I had a hospitality business now, was working internally within a few of the best operators in my sector, I'd say, well, that's only a win for me, because they're going to bring so much more knowledge and experience than had they just been entirely within my organization for the whole time.
And I guess to dovetail the conversation about why this is a huge opportunity now, because you need the flexibility, you need to be closer to the front line. I guess also when you get layers out, You are closer as the CEO to the front line again, exactly where the real value is delivered and created. I guess there's also about that thing about don't get set in your way. So often when you have a senior team, when you have a really good culture, that's I've seen myself, you have a senior team that stays for a very long time, which is great, but actually you don't get other perspectives on how you do things around here. We just do this way we're doing, and we're still running this report, but because that makes us comfortable, and that report maybe has its way, but maybe that person doesn't need to run anymore. So it becomes very much more of the same if you don't reinvent yourself. And I think that's another interesting, fractional come in with perspective and innovation you wouldn't have had done, yeah? Because you wouldn't been thinking like that, because you haven't been in 5 different organizations. These people maybe been 20 years in the same organization. I see that very much in partner-led businesses where the founding group is in a way innovation stops at some point, yeah, because they don't get challenged, from the outside.
Yeah, exactly. And we did that thing once a few years ago and it didn't work, so we're never doing it again. Or like you say, we've always done it this way. I think when you're, the other thing I realized being a freelancer is you are constantly justifying your value. You don't have any sort of security in terms of okay, I've got this job, I'm hopefully doing okay, so keep my head down and stay out of trouble. Should be fine. If you're sending an invoice to a business every month or whenever, whatever the regularity is, that they are going to be looking at that going, oh, that's a lot of money. Do we really need this person? What are they actually doing for us? So like you're sort of hardwired to just constantly be refining and improving your skill set. So I think that you're kept on your toes a lot more as a fractional consultant, and I think that having those people in your business at that level, you'd feel that coming through in terms of wanting to innovate, wanting to push things and improve things all the time.
What are you most excited about right now on this journey? Because I guess when you launched that platform within those 7 days, you wouldn't have expected 500 people sign up, a lot of projects going in, as it often is that you said, there's something in here and I need to go and trial it out, and test it and see what the market says. And where you are now, what makes you really excited? Where can you see this go?
I think the thing that really excites me is the idea that it might become broadly adopted by the industry in terms of a method of working. It's still quite niche, using a fractional, using a consultant. It's not a lot of businesses do it, but I think it's growing. So I think if I can build something that's potentially helps move that forward a little bit, and if it does, if that side of the industry does flourish, then it becomes a sort of central point for those people to find work, for those people and for those businesses to find people. That excites me massively, and it feels very much like it's just at the beginning of that movement from what I can see. So hopefully it moves in that direction.
What have been your top learning as you've done this transition from being a business owner, operating a business, to then consultant now to develop this platform, what you can say is a small business in itself? And what is like the main learning you've done the last couple of years as you've done that transition?
I think that the speed that you can build things now is incredible. Like compared to even a year ago, even 6 months ago, you can, I'm not a software engineer. I actually studied IT at uni about 1 million years ago. It's probably not that relevant to now, but I've taught myself vibe coding. I've been able to build, essentially an online marketplace, a SaaS platform. And I've just figured it out as I've gone. And that just wasn't an option. Had I had this idea even a year ago, I probably would have had to go out and raise money, convince somebody to back it, spend 6 months, paying some people to build it. So the speed at which you can move is absolutely incredible. But I think the flip side of that is that just because you can do everything fast and low cost doesn't necessarily mean that you should do everything. And there's because you've got now the ability to add loads of features, run in 7 different directions at once. I have to rein myself in. And what I found is that just spending time, probably 90% of my time in the first 3 months of the business was just spent talking, video calls like this with the initial people that signed up, understanding how they wanted to use the platform, understanding what they liked, what they didn't like. And that led me to do quite short iterative development cycles with the platform, where I just, build it a little bit, put it out, test it, build a little bit more, test it again. And, again, you couldn't have done that really in any sort of practical way a couple of years ago. So that's meant hopefully that I haven't gone running down roads that were never going to work and spending a load of time and effort building something that people didn't want, because pretty much every step of the way I was getting feedback from the real users. So that's probably those 2 things have been the most significant learnings.
Yeah, and I think it's about, again, doesn't matter how fast you can run, as you say. And I think another thing I've noticed is also, if you don't ask the right questions, so you said you were talking with people, actually think about the quality of your question now is actually more important to spend time on it is than to find out how do you actually get this thing built. Because the tip of your fingers, you can get so many different platforms where you can build apps. Yeah. So you can build a new website in minutes, but actually, what is exactly on this page or that functionality? I've just been working on a customer platform where we're trying to get all the insights into the platform and make it more operational. And of course, we've done that with AI and Claude and a couple other platforms. And actually, the amount of features people want within the business. And then I said, what exactly is really important for the client? What is the insight you need to fix to have this business running in 5 years? That's what we need to get through. And then we can build all the other things afterward. But actually, in principle, you need to have correct data, first of all. And you need to know that actually you're working on the right things in the front line, and actually what they get as info is actually relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's a daily struggle to pull myself back from that.
Yeah.
Oh, why don't we just, this would be cool. Why don't I build this feature that I think I'd like to build, but would have zero utility? So yeah, it's and it's really, I remember when I was just first starting it, I was talking to Jonah, who built Blend. Know those guys pretty well, and he said MVP with like M in bold, uppercase, capital, like size
viable product,
size 60 font, triple underlined, minimum, and didn't really listen at the time. But like now I sort of like, I think most of the things where this needs to be rolled back is because I've just got excited with features and plugging AI in and doing. It's like, well, what is the actual? If you're not giving the user the answer that they're looking for here, you're just annoying them. If you're adding more steps and more, beautiful dashboards and things. So that's a really, really good insight, I think.
What is the one question, Pete, you wished I've asked you? What would the question be, and what would the answer be?
This is a difficult one. I wasn't really, really sure what this would be. And I'm not sure it's like the question I wanted you to ask, but it's probably the question that would have been interesting to ask, which would be, what would be the single biggest factor? So if well season failed, what would be the thing that the thing that killed it, essentially? It's maybe a little bit of a negative way to end.
No. It's a very good question. Yeah.
But
talking about great questions. Yeah. Quality of questions. Yeah. What is it?
It's something that's a question I always have I try and keep at the forefront of my mind in terms of like, what's the thing that's going to mean that this doesn't work? And I think for me, it's if it just becomes like a static directory, if it's just a list of people that do a job, I think that's if it ends up going sort of stale like that, I think that's the issue. And one of the things again, actually, like good advice early doors. Andy, my co-founder of our old business, was like, he's like, you should lean into the community of this thing. I think that would be a good strategy. And he's absolutely right. the community side of it is what makes it work. I think the consultants, we're trying, have online meetups. Hopefully we'll have in-person meetups at some point when, we're a bit bigger or we've got more finances, and the helpful advice and the sharing ideas and, getting it, sort of, even little messages on LinkedIn and things like that. I think you need vibrancy in a marketplace or a platform. You need sort of stuff happening like regularly and, connections being made. And I think, that not, if anything was to happen to stop that happening, I think that would be the time to close it down and move on.
That was a really good question, Pete. And I like that. I think it's a long time since I heard it, but actually I worked together with a guy once and he talked about that. I worked in a cafe chain and he talked about what is it that's going to make, what decisions can we make that actually will put us into so much trouble we don't exist. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. It's a good thought process.
Or will this decision, especially when we talked about price, funny enough, we hired a marketing director and he wanted to emulate what I would call the coin offers from McDonald's, and I was responsible for operation, and I was very much, this was a mid-higher end cafe chain, I would say, with organic food, and so I said, I don't understand why we need to get offers, or we need more people to come into the cafes. Yeah, you're right about that, but I actually think we're going to push some of our existing customers to actually value the product, because we will have to cut corners somewhere. Service, and it became a service, because they couldn't afford more labor costs. And it was really interesting. We forgot to ask ourselves that question. Because we got traffic, but we didn't make more profit, But
it's an important question. Just don't ask yourself at 3 o'clock in the morning when you can't sleep. That tends to be the time when you don't normally do ask it.
I think it's a really important question. But again, also you can forget to ask that. On every big decision, you need to ask that. What this decision could that actually kill our business? That's different ways of saying this. Great.
I think it's like, hospitality. It's a cliche, like you're only as good as your last
meal,
or your last meal. And I think it is true. You've sort of got to just look at actually how are you delivering value right here, right now. It doesn't really matter what you've done before. Like what's the, if that's trending up, great. And if it's trending down, then you need to, you need to make adjustments.
You're no better than you were today. I always say, so tomorrow you need to outperform that. It's either you need to become much better, or you actually need to pick yourself up. That's also what happens. Great, Pete. Thank you so much for coming on. If people want to reach out, maybe join your platform or just have a conversation, maybe add some good questions to your journey, how can they get in contact with you?
The platform's called Well Seasoned. It's at wellseasoned.work. They can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Pete Hurley. You can see, hopefully there's maybe a link. You can maybe put a link in the podcast description, or email me, pete@wellseasoned.work. Get in touch. By all means, if you're working in hospitality and a consultant, freelance, fractional basis, love to have you on the platform. You can sign up really easily on the website. And equally, if you're a hospitality business that hires that sort of talent, again, you can join up. It's completely free. There's a paid membership coming down the line for the consultant side of things, but for businesses, it's completely free. Sign up, post a project, find a consultant. So you can get going in sort of 10 seconds, 30 seconds on the website.
Great. Thank you so much, Pete. Power and energy to the journey. And thank you for sharing your insights about how to maybe build the future of hospitality, organization, and leadership.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been really, really nice to chat.